Word. Well, bitterness, right? It is something we hear about from time to time in the Scriptures. As a matter of fact, it's not an uncommon topic because it is such a part of what you're going to face in life. Most of the time, whenever we hear about the subject of bitterness, we hear about it from the angle of maybe we've been done wrong, possibly somebody has sinned against us, and how that we need to exercise forgiveness unless, or if we don't, then maybe bitterness will set in, so forth and so on. Well, tonight we're going to look at it from a little bit of a different angle, but I believe the angle we're going to look at it tonight is actually truer to the text, even though it's much harder to receive. And that's how that Esau here in the book of Hebrews chapter number 12 ends up a very bitter man, and he is bitter over the situation with his birthright. If you remember correctly, back in the book of Genesis, he sold that birthright when he was in a hardship, mind you, and a little bit later, whenever it come time for the birthright to be distributed, he really wanted that birthright, right? But it was too late. He'd already sold it to his brother, and the problem was that he got real bitter over not being the one that got the birthright. But he had nobody to blame but himself. It was all his fault, Brother DJ. He did every bit of that himself, had nobody to blame but the man in the mirror, even though back in those days I don't even know if they had mirrors. But it doesn't change the fact that it was all his fault. Now, you and I understand the greater context of the passage deals with the chastening of the believer. Back in verse number 11, we're taught about how beneficial it is if we need to be chastened and we receive it well. He said in Hebrews 12:11, now no chastening for the present seemeth to be joyous, but grievous. Nevertheless, afterward it yieldeth the peaceable fruit of righteousness unto them which are exercised thereby. Whenever you're living a life lesson, whenever you have done something and later on down the road you have sowed the seeds and now the crop comes up and it's bitter fruit and you start eating that and the taste is very bad in your mouth. Can I say this? Then sometimes the Lord will remind you that this is a chastening experience. If you receive that right, you can grow from it. You never have to walk through it again. But if you do what I call the easy way out, if you take the easy way out and just look for somebody else to blame, it's somebody else's fault why this happened to me, and you don't take any of the blame for yourself, you're going to be honestly live most of your life, and this is the results of doing that or living that way, as a victim. You'll never see anything that happened to you as partially or in some way, shape, or form your own doing. Esau here is an example of that. He made a terrible decision. He mishandled the consequences, gets bitter instead of getting better, and because of that, he goes down in history, biblically speaking, as one of the worst of the worst. Can I say that bitterness will do that to any of us? It will sour the well in which the water is intended to come out and be a blessing to other people, but if you're bitter in your life, you won't be a blessing to anybody. You can't be a blessing to even yourself. You can't be a blessing to others. And he's the poster child, Esau is, of how not to handle something when it goes wrong and it's your fault. When we talk about that, sometimes it's a little bit hard to swallow. But if we look back over situations in our life that possibly caused bitterness with us, we will find that in many cases, as you will find tonight, it was the individual's fault themselves. It's not uncommon to see people lament. And again, some of this is sensitive in nature, but I'm just trying to help us the best I can. It's not impossible or it's not unusual to hear people lament a bad marriage. But you got to remember this. I doubt many of them were shotgun weddings. Which means this. If an individual picks a bad one, some of that has to land with us. Right? You hear people talk about financial hardships. And there are true hardships that you can go through financially. That's whenever something happens to you that's completely out of your control. We all know this. We're one trip from the doctor's office away from being in complete financial reversal. We're just one change in the economy from being in a bad position or whatever the case may be. But I do occasionally hear some people lament financial hardships, and if you were to ask them, well, did you choose not to position yourself to better yourself? Meaning, after school? Did you have an opportunity to go to college and you chose not to, or an opportunity to go to trade school, or opportunity to get on with somebody and then you chose not to? If the answer is yes, well, then I really don't have anybody to blame but myself. If I'm experiencing financial hardship and there was work available and other people were getting that overtime and making that extra money, and I wanted to get off after 40 so I could go do my hobbies, my financial hardships is nobody else's fault but my own. If I'm experiencing financial hardships, there's no reason to get mad at everybody else who's prospering and doing well if I have bad money management skills. It's not y'all's fault. That's why I think covetousness is probably one of the sins that most attest me personally. I can't stand to hear people talk about others and what they have, and I'm not one of the haves. I'm as much of a have-not sometimes as a have. But when people are working hard and doing well, or maybe their parents done something differently than the parents before, and you hear people talk about, well, you know, they must be nicer. I pick on them all the time, and, you know, it must be nice, and somebody give me something. I can just shut up. Yeah, it would have been nice had you had a rich uncle or a rich grandpa, and you know, it may go back in deeper in your family history where, you know, I don't mean anything by this, but maybe if one guy's grandpa is a businessman and he's working hard to make money, he can leave to his family, and this guy over here's grandpa was a drunk who didn't even have enough money to bury himself. It's going to affect the family tree. Can I get a witness in here? Are y'all living tonight? Don't be bitter at the people around you that have. Be bitter at your grandpa for drinking away your inheritance.